2 months or less, I guess, or 6 months or so. So we'll move now on to approval of general fund and other funds, 14-15 budget, item 5. Come on down. You got 2 minutes? I'm just kidding.
I was going to go through every page
Absolutely. Do it.
of the SACS report. To summarize this in the next 30 seconds, the major change from the last budget study session and this report that you have in front of you is approximately $120,000 for the increase of the science teacher and some other adjustments that we found that we had to make to certificated salaries. With that being said, everything else is the same. We still have our 4% required reserve for economic uncertainties over the next 3 years. We do have and continue to have the structural deficit that we need to address this year for next year. With that being said, I'll take any questions you may have.
That was quick.
Yeah, I got a question.
Member Glenn?
I just have one question. I seen in the standard criteria that we and you may have explained this earlier, but I just don't remember. How did we end up reducing or losing ACES money, $45,000 worth of ACES money?
Our entitlement went down from the prior year.
How did that happen?
We had to send funds back to Sacramento
Okay,
in ACES.
okay. For
So-
what reason? I don't remember.
I can't remember.
It was a programmatic reason. That's all
Yeah.
that's all I know.
That sounds familiar.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I believe that the ACES funding is based on prior year attendance.
Okay, that's right. That's
So,
right. That must have been attendance.
And even when I was here, sometimes that was,
That was
you
a
know,
big issue.
the rec department would say, you know, our attendance is low, we got to find a way to drum up
Yep.
more business
Right,
because it'll
right.
affect
That
the
makes
next
sense.
following year funding. So
We must have paid
it's really
for it.
based on, it's kind of arrears funding. It's based on what your prior year attendance is. The attendance drops and the entitlement goes down.
Right, so we must have got paid revenue that we didn't earn through attendance in 1 year, and they recouped it the following year.
And this year attendance is up in discussions with Cindy Montero.
Okay, so we may get that funding back next year.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Bonet on the budget? Okay, you know what, do you mind doing that $700,000
Yeah, that's my
number,
question.
actually, on that slide 3, I guess?
Kind of explain where the deficit is and how it grew from,
24 hours, huh?
yeah.
Twenty-
No, it grew from 746 to 869. It was
What page
because
are
of
you
the, that's on page 3, slide 5, on the multi-year projection.
Holy crap.
Right in the middle, you have revenues versus expenses. I pointed this out to the board during the study session, and it grew
Zero.
because we added the science teacher and we made some other adjustments.
And the loss of
I do want
Europe,
to,
right?
I do want to point out that even that shows an increase, there is a full-time position that is still in the budget on the expenditure side that is probably not going to be filled for next year.
Okay.
It's a non-classroom teaching position,
Then I understand.
and I think Dr. Rubio is waiting to hire a new elementary principal and wanting to work with that principal to determine whether there in fact is a need for that position. But so when the district staff makes the adjustment to the budget,
That'd be different.
either at the latest by first interim, if not before,
See a change.
that position will fall out. So even though they're, you know, so assuming nothing else changes in terms of expenditures, that 863 or 73 number should then come down by about $100,000.
Okay. That's helpful.
And it may be slightly higher after discussions with the principal and after the 45-day, when we come back to the board with the exact LCFF numbers after the school services workshop. Income may be slightly higher, as Member Affelt said, the state increased their funding to schools slightly just this last week just before they signed the budget, before the governor signed the budget, excuse me. So there'll be changes that are more on the positive side when we bring that back to the board.
But just trying to think, second interim, what was our project? Wasn't it like 475?
At second interim, it was $700,000, but
Was
we
it that
had,
high? Okay.
I had a slide that showed the board that some of that was one-time and was planned
Mhm.
deficit spending.
Mhm.
So there was there's 177,000 in here from cafeteria.
Mhm.
Which was also the case this last year.
That the encroachment on the general fund?
That's correct.
Is 177?
Yes, and then we had the one-time bonuses that we paid out, and we had in excess of $200,000 that we put into technology.
Mhm.
Redoing the computer labs, replacing student computers, and replacing computers for our teachers.
That was one time. Okay.
And
we
you may,
used we
I'm
used the
sorry.
one-time carryover funds from the parcel tax to accomplish that.
And you mentioned this last time, I think, and I apologize if you mentioned it tonight, but we also had some grants that have ended, and those salaries are having to shift over
That's correct.
and also impact the general fund.
That was probably one of the bigger pieces, the
Yeah.
picking up of salaries that were funded by
By
Gear Up.
Yeah. And, right, and we're putting in for that again, right? And
But no
Yes.
guarantee.
and
we are.
when will we know, one way or another?
Fall?
Was it October?
Well, the Gear Up application is due July 7th. I know Ms. Allen has been meeting with our partners that are required to have to submit an application, and with the assistance of Townsend Public Affairs. And so I think the intention is get the grant submitted by July 7th, and we should hear sometime in September.
And that, I know you told me this last time, but I'm going to ask again. That money will apply to 14-15 or 15-16?
Well, usually the federal funding cycle will begin, I think it's like October 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
The
that is-
federal runs on October 1 to
Right.
September 30th cycle.
So we could see money this year?
Well,
If
we
get
should
the-
know, if we get funded, we'll get an entitlement letter. The question about when we actually see the check in the bank, that I can't answer, but
Yeah.
my assumption is we're talking about funding for the federal October 1 of 14 through September 30th of 15 year.
All right. Fingers crossed.
You know, I'm looking at this multi-year projections, and I'm really looking at 13-14 and the deficit that we're embarking on for 13-14, which is almost $1 million. So I guess my question, Mr. Bonet, and I think you just said it, is that a large contributor to this deficit in 13-14 are for some one-time expenditures.
That's correct.
Okay. Do we know how much those add up, those one-time expenditures add up to, based on this $900-some thousand deficit?
I can get that,
Okay,
yes.
that'd be good. Thank you.
Wow. Any other questions for Mr. Bonet on the budget adopted, or the proposed budget in front of us? Okay, thank you. Any public comments on this particular item? No? She said get it done. She said make it happen. No, she said public comment. She just reminded public comment. So, no public comment at this time. So with the board, can I get a motion to approve to adopt the budget as provided? I'll move approval of the of the budget for 2014-15. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any objections? roll call just to make it all nice and neat.
Member Dwin?
Yes.
President Dice?
Yes.
Member Affelt?
Yes.
Member Ash?
Yes.
Member Pats?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for incorporating those changes
I'm sorry,
soon
the
as
item took
yesterday.
10 minutes.
Great. See, you didn't do bad at all. Thank you. Appreciate that. So we now have